Okay, so I'm going to do something a little different today, which is a presentation on a topic that I see come up somewhat frequently online about whether timeshares are part of a cult that only people who can't do math appropriately are into, as I saw posted on Reddit recently, or just is there any value proposition to a timeshare that I see all the time on the Tug forums, as well as in all sorts of news articles. Now, in determining a value proposition for timeshares, one of the things we need to do is work out what are we comparing the value of. That is to say, what should be included in this comparison. So obviously locations need to be taken into account. Timeshares do have limited locations, but I will be comparing a location that has a timeshare as well as other options. How much planning is needed? So I'm just going to kind of assume something here that is, I guess, a little beneficial to timeshares, but isn't that unusual, at least for me in real life, which is I'm going to plan for December here on April 1st. And the reason that I'm doing this is because even in trips that I went on pre-timeshare, if I was going to be traveling over 1,000 miles, possibly flying, I would be planning months and months ahead. And so this isn't really that out of bounds for going to a hotel either, again, if I'm going to need to travel a long distance to get there. The other things that I think are important are comparing as close to like as you can. So same number of bedrooms, if possible. Everything in a unit or room that you're comparing. What kind of amenities are in the area? Like, does it have a hot tub or a jacuzzi available to you? Are there pools? Maybe a sauna, golf, other things in the area? Maybe you're just going on to the beach. Other activities that might be planned when you're talking about timeshares. They often will have crafts, wine tastings, get-togethers for owners, paid things you can do to go on like llama hikes and things. So these are all things that you should compare. Okay, but so compared to what? Well, as I have on this slide, staying home is obviously something you could compare to, and I think that's not really a good comparison. It's kind of like comparing cameras with not taking any pictures as an option. That is to say, it seems like missing the point. If you're going to say that timeshares have a negative value proposition compared to just staying home and not going on any trips whatsoever, I'm not going to argue with you. But then I'm not sure why we're having any kind of discussion in that case. Hotels, RVing, Airbnb, all of those, right, don't compare well with financially, with staying home. But you're going to want to go on vacations, you're going to want to go on trips, at least that's the assumption if you're comparing any of these things. RVing, Airbnb, and hotels are kind of the comparisons I could think of, with hotels being the most obvious comparison. It's what I've found most people, especially online, when they're talking about comparing a timeshare value proposition, they're talking about hotels. They're saying, well, I can just book at any time, and I don't have to plan, and I don't have to have any kind of annual commitment. So I'm going to spend some time talking about each of these, but I'm going to lean more towards what I think are the more direct comparisons of Airbnb or hotels. Okay, and there's a couple things that some people who are here from Tug are going to ask about, and maybe if you've done a lot of research, again, pretty much on the Tug forums, maybe some Facebook groups, you might be asking this question too. I'm not going to compare to renting timeshares directly from other timeshare owners, and there's some reasons for that. It would need a whole other video, I think. It has a whole other set of risks that are in some ways very, very different from any of the things I am comparing. And there's also kind of a completely different set of methods needed, in my opinion. It's not something that you can go to any kind of single website and then do a search and get an aggregated list, or at least number of options from a particular company or brand, right? And so that's just kind of very far outside the scope of this comparison. But what I will say is, without proving it to you in this video, when I've checked, at best, they still seem to cost more renting than if you were to be an owner of the system. And I think that usually makes sense. There are some very limited cases in my searches anyway where I've seen that that isn't the case. And then Vacation Club, like Armed Forces Vacation Club. So this isn't something like a Mexican right to use system or some of the very expensive to buy in discounts at certain all-inclusive resorts or something. But these are things that basically give you some access to timeshares without owning a timeshare and without necessarily paying for a normal membership to an exchange company. But I only have third-hand knowledge of them. It's not quite as straightforward as really anybody with the money can rent a hotel, anybody with the money can buy an RV, anybody with the money can buy a timeshare, but many of them have specific requirements to be a member, like you have to be a veteran or something. There are potentially ways around that, but I'm not going to suggest playing fast and loose with any rules, so at least for this video I'm not going to compare that either. Well, I know that many people will want to do a deep dive on RVing versus timeshares. I'm really going to just have this slide and just very quickly say my impressions. I'm not going to go out and do a lot of research and do screenshots and everything of that. And the reasons here are, it's a completely different style from staying in Airbnbs, timeshares, or hotels. It requires driving the RV to all locations you want to go to. The initial purchase costs are very, very high also, probably more in a lot of cases than your basic even retail timeshare purchase, and especially compared to, say, a resale timeshare purchase where you purchase a quote-unquote used timeshare. And then if you're going to say, well, what if I bought a used RV? Well, that has everything involved with like buying a used car, right? And then more. And sometimes the options can be a little dirty for people's feeling comfortable with. I'm not saying all of them are like that or anything, but I am saying that if you're going to look at what used RVs you could get for the going rates of used timeshares, they are not going to be nice late model ones. Also, it's like a whole new set of skills you're signing up for. There's, I guess, some different skills between booking hotels, owning a timeshare and booking a timeshare, and booking Airbnbs, but I don't think they're on the level of needing to know how to drive a much larger vehicle, pumping waste and going to pumping stations, running and maintaining a generator. These seem like a completely different set of skills to me, at least for most people. Now, I'm not saying these are skills you shouldn't get, but I am saying it's like more than just using a different website. Also, in most of the math that I've seen people do, or people I've talked to who do own an RV, it's got a lot of upkeep, and its gas mileage when you're driving them is very poor. This isn't like driving a modern, even a modern pickup truck or SUV that's going to average, 20 miles per gallon. It's more like driving an old F-250 that's towing something, and you're talking more like 10 miles per gallon, sometimes less. And a lot of times they're using diesel, so it's even more expensive. So I don't know that you would even find, trying to do some off-the-cuff math, that it would ever kind of pay back the initial purchase cost, and it wouldn't compare well, I don't think, with timeshares at all. Okay, but so what about Airbnb? It used to be the cheap option to hotels and really anything, but we all know that's really no longer the case. Airbnb isn't really seen as a massive way to save money anymore. And I'll do some research and show you some screenshots and do a little bit of math in the next slide. But I'm going to point out some of the other things that are potentially an issue when you're comparing Airbnb to, say, timeshares or hotels. And it's kind of more Wild West than hotels or resorts. Airbnb is like Uber, it's a disruptor. It's like eBay. It's not running anything. It has no franchise agreements or direct control of any of the properties as far as I know. So it can be really hard to tell what it is that you're booking, and it can be pretty different to parse their website and their listings, because I guess anybody can almost write the listing however they want to. And so if you've ever tried to deal with Facebook Marketplace or things like that, you can realize how strange that can get. I've heard a lot of reporting from both on Reddit, other places on the internet, as well as reputable newspapers that Airbnb tends to have some surprise fees after the stay by a lot of hosts. Those range from cleaning fees that are different than the cleaning fee that Airbnb charges to somewhat bogus, you didn't clean well enough before you left, so there's an extra fee, and you kind of just have to pay that, or you're going to have credit card disputes and potentially legal disputes. So it can be kind of hard to tell, well, how much is this actually going to cost? And as I said, there are lots more cleaning than expected. Well, in a hotel, you're expected to do no cleaning whatsoever. Timeshares do expect you to do a little cleaning, usually run the dishwasher and take out the trash, sometimes gather up the linens and dirty towels into a specific place. But I've seen many reports of Airbnb hosts saying they want you to sweep and mop the floors, vacuum the house, get all the beds stripped and ready to go, take out the trash, clean the sinks. It's unclear, right? And you don't know from location to location, so it's really hard to compare directly. I'm sure there are some Airbnb hosts who work just like a hotel. I don't know how much they charge to do that. The other things that I should point out here is there's usually no on-site maintenance, housekeeping, or service staff of any sort. At least in much of the reporting I've seen, Airbnbs are either kind of in somebody's house, so you might have them to help you. It's kind of like staying with a stranger, and that doesn't necessarily feel the same as a timeshare or a hotel, or an RV for that matter. Or it's got like a Dropbox code thing to get the keys, or code number they give you just before check-in to unlock the door, and there's nobody there but you, and it's completely unconnected. There's no front desk, there's no housekeeping you can call, there's no maintenance you can call if anything from a light bulb doesn't work to a sink starts, leaking from a pipe, right? There's just nothing you can do. And what if you get to the unit or Airbnb and it's just completely unacceptable to you for some reason? It's just like it wasn't actually cleaned from the last guest. It's completely disgusting. Something else is wrong. You have really not a lot of chance to say, hey, I just want a different hotel room, or I just want a different unit, move me because this just isn't good enough. But those are things you can pretty easily do in a hotel and or a timeshare. Also, I'm going to point out that amenities, the expectations are different, right? If you're staying in some places, you're going to be like an entire vacation house, and then you'd have often a pool and a hot tub. Then again, I haven't seen very many listings at all that also have a fitness center or mention a fitness center. Forget about saunas or steam rooms or bocce ball areas or tennis courts or ping pong tables, right? They usually don't have all of these. A lot of resorts do actually have all of these. And then on top of all of that, most of the time, almost every time I've done a comparison, whatever comparison I'm going to make, it's cost more. Now, for this comparison I'm going to do the same comparison for Airbnb and for hotels. So I'm going to compare both of them to a Club Wyndham Royal Vista location. This is right near Pompano Beach, Fort Lauderdale, in Florida, and I think that it is a kind of location that people tend to think about when they think of resorts or hotels. It's a beach vacation location. Let's see. In this value proposition, I'm comparing right on the beach, not a few blocks away from the beach or near the beach, but locations that, at least from the pictures and research that I can do, seem to be directly on the beach with not much in between them. Now, I picked early December as being far enough out from April 1st to have bookable rooms in the timeshares. And also, it's usually about how far out I'd plan a travel vacation. As I said before, it's like 1,000 miles one way for me, so take that into account. Maybe that's not the kind of travel you're thinking about, but I feel like for moderate sized vacation trips, this does seem reasonable. I'm picking a week period, Saturday to Saturday, which is just pretty normal for timeshares, and I'm comparing the exact same times with hotels and Airbnbs. It's debatable whether I should do from a Saturday to Saturday. I could do different date periods. We could argue about whether I should do a week. I guess this part is potentially a little like leading into making it easier for timeshares, but in this example with Wyndham's system, I could book 2 days on a weekend only, I suppose. But I'm just comparing sort of a week-long stay that's the traditional vacation that people talk about when they talk about timeshares. You can scale a lot of this pretty easily, and if there's a lot of comments or something, I can look at to doing an updated comparison. If people say, hey, I really think you should compare this other kind of trip or this other time of year or this other location. But this doesn't seem completely beneficial to timeshares. This seems like a common sort of trip people like to do. I'm also looking for the same number of bedrooms, so this location has 2-bedroom suites, and I think that that is a big selling point of timeshares, and it's certainly something that comes up for me a lot. I could see in both situations where you're like me, who has I'm an adult, my adult sister, her husband, we like to travel together, we really prefer 2 bedrooms, or a lot of people, there will be the parents and then the kids, and again, as the kids are getting at least a little older, if they're teenagers or something, you definitely might want them in a different bedroom as well. It doesn't seem like this is a bad comparison to me, although things scale a little bit if you're saying I only want 1 bedroom. And I'm actually not really in this case going to compare the activities very much. I'm just thinking about beach access and driving to stuff in the Fort Lauderdale area, Pompano Beach area, which you can do from any of these sort of options. So, as you can see here, the location that I picked is near one of the 2 little pins that they have there right on the beach on that road. And you can see it's a 2-bedroom deluxe. You can see the address, you can look it up. And you can see it's 182,500 points from Wyndham to book this now. And I'll go into details as to like what that actually means and how you can compare it at the end. Okay, so here's an Airbnb search that I just did, and as you can see, there's basically 2-ish locations that pop up that are right on the beach there in the similar area, and they have very different prices. I'm going to look at both of them. You can see the room, both are say room in Hollywood. One is stay with Donna, one is stay with Rocky. And I will admit I'm not the biggest Airbnb user, so I'm not entirely sure what this means, but when I clicked through, and I'll show screenshots of them, I'll talk about what I was thinking as someone who's just a very casual user of the Airbnb website. And I suppose you could argue I should be looking at some of the places that are much cheaper, that are inland or in different areas, but again, it doesn't seem like a fair comparison because I think location is important. But if you're not that worried about being directly on the ocean, there are also options through various systems for less money inland that are timeshares as well, that I think compare favorably with the Airbnb prices here. Okay, so this is the cheaper Airbnb option that I found that was on the beach. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure how to parse these Airbnb listings. Is this a private unit? Are you sharing a house with other people? It says it has 3 bedrooms, but then only one is described. So I don't know how close this is, but it seems like a cheaper option. You can see here it's unfortunately 1702 in euros. I don't really know why it's in euros. That's something I couldn't convince Airbnb to show me it in dollars. But I did use xe.com to adjust and convert to dollars for this. For this. Okay, so this was the second one, the more expensive one, but I do think it sounds to me, reading this, that it's a more comparable. It's rental units, it has a shared jacuzzi. It sounds like it's a more private unit that you're renting. But as you can see, to get this one, it's 4,724 euro. And again, I'll do that conversion in a little bit on another slide. Okay, but the other thing I want to compare in this final comparison is hotels. And that's because I think most people compare to hotels most of the time when people are telling me, well, I can just book it whenever I want and it doesn't cost me very much. I have no buy-in, right? And I have no ongoing obligation. So that's usually going to be people thinking about hotels. And at least for me, most of my comparisons in terms of what do I expect when I go stay at a place has to be hotels. I think that's what most people have the most experience with. Okay, so you have to consider the number of rooms. If you're booking a hotel, you get one hotel room in most cases, and that hotel room may or may not have a fridge in it or a microwave anymore. The fridge is tiny, and so it can be hard to store very much in it. It's not going to have a kitchen. It's not going to have a stove. It's not going to have a place you can cook. It's not going to have a living room. It doesn't tend to have a balcony. It doesn't tend to have laundry. If it's available, it's a service through the hotel. And let me tell you, those prices are insane. I've looked into them, and sometimes it's like as much as buying another shirt at Walmart for them to wash it and bring it back to you. Or I suppose you could go to a laundromat somewhere else, right, and then do laundry all day long. That is an option, but it's not really have anything to do with the hotel. And I'm just going to say, as far as I can tell, hotels just always cost a lot more, especially if you're going to double it to have 2 rooms. And I think you have to compare 2 hotel rooms at a minimum to a 2-bedroom unit, because you've got 2 bedrooms, and that privacy or that amount of sleeping space is a big deal. Now, again, maybe you're going to say, I never travel with any reason to have 2 hotel rooms, so that will adjust this a little bit, but I'm talking about a lot of cases. There are trips that I would have said I just can't do because I couldn't do it with 1 hotel room. That I now can do with timeshares, and I do think that's an important part of the value proposition. If you're not someone who's going to be using multiple bedrooms or not going to be using any of the different room options, I still think a lot of times timeshares come out to be cheaper though. So I tend to find that Hilton has a lot of options for places to stay. I find that their units and their locations are usually good enough to pretty nice. And I find that they tend to have options all over the price spectrum. I know some people hear Hilton and are thinking $1,000 a night, Conrad's or, Waldorf Astoria's. But think of Hampton Inns, think of Embassy Suites, think of DoubleTrees, think of Hilton Garden Inns. And a lot of times they're all going to be similar price point, and they're going to be near the lower end of what you're going to find in what I would consider decent hotels. They even have units that a lot of the time are within $20 a night of, I don't know, like a Motel 6 or something. They're around $100 for some of them. Now that's not going to be the case right here on the beach, resort on the beach. So obviously take that with the grain of salt that you need to take it with. So for simplicity's sake, I had Hilton do a search on the entire week. So those are the prices you see here, but for one bedroom. And as you can see, kind of in that same area, I was looking and I kind of ended up picking an Embassy Suites, which I thought was the closest to being, right on the beach there. There are obviously some cheaper options that are inland a bit, but again, I want to compare like to like. Okay, so this is the location that I picked. You can certainly argue with it, but as you can see in the picture, it looks like it's a comparable sort of resort to the Wyndham. It's right on the beach. It's nearby. So I think this is a fair one to use. So choosing their absolute cheapest non-refundable options, so you have no cancellations and you are just locked in, but not looking at some discounts they offer for being a member of their Hilton Honors program, because again, we just want to look at something that just anybody could theoretically book. You can see for one room, mind you, it's $2,149.15. Okay, so to put this all together for the Airbnb or the Hilton.com, you can see I picked middling prices. I used XC.com to convert, so you can see with the conversion, it's Airbnb was $1,836.49 in a shared house, $5,097.28 in a rental unit with the shared amenities, and then you can see that Hilton.com, it was $24,915 for one room. We're going to double it for two because again we're talking about two bedroom comparisons here, so $4,838.30. And as you can see, Airbnb prices vary so much, it's hard to say like I should look at Airbnb, but you can make an argument that for a similar location, similar number of bedrooms, and similar amenities, it's more expensive than getting two hotel rooms at the Embassy Suites. Okay, so we have our prices for everything. What about Wyndham? You saw it was $182,500 points. Well, in my 2025 maintenance fees, and I don't have the best maintenance fees. I didn't have the cheapest buy-in or anything, but I had what I consider reasonable ones on the resale market. You can see that my maintenance fees would make that $1,351.85. Now, I don't really care how you want to figure on an ongoing basis. That's going to be a savings in my book. Even looking at kind of only getting one bedroom in a hotel that's comparable, or going to the cheaper, maybe it's a shared house Airbnb that's otherwise comparable. This is a noticeable savings. Now, if you're going to amortize the purchase price, it can vary a lot, right? If you're going to try and look at this and say you purchased retail, then you can have an awful lot to amortize. If you buy it resale on the secondary market, it can be free to buy it. But it does show that I think you'll be working towards breaking even as long as you're actually traveling and taking those trips. So it'll just be a question of how long is it to your break-even point. But I do think there's a value proposition here that's kind of obvious. Now, with resale, I bought it for $2,000. And this would be my 5th direct Wyndham stay if I was to book it. That's over 2 years. So if I amortize that in, I'm still saving in comparison by about $100 over the cheapest Airbnb, and I'm saving a lot in comparison to even a single hotel room. And if I compare the more comparable Airbnb or the two hotel rooms, the amortization of $400 purchase price per trip, it doesn't matter. And that goes down every year that you're using it. So, once I hit 10 stays, it'd be $200 I'm advertising. And depending on how you figure, your amortizations out and what kind of a number of trips you do, it can get negligible pretty quick. Or if you had a very expensive retail purchase, other people have done the math and tend to see it break even in about 10 years. So take that for what you will. But these are, far from the best deals in either purchase price or maintenance fees. that I'm giving you here, so I'm not giving you an extra rosy example, especially if we're talking resale. You can do better than I did, for sure, if you're willing to hunt around. So anyway, I hope this is useful to people, and I hope people find that this was a relatively fair comparison. But again, we could look at this in other ways, slice and dice it in a couple other ways. And I still think for the vast majority of times, as long as you're actually going on, week-long trips, you're going to be seeing quite a value proposition if you can plan and use the timeshare.